First of all, I'm going to introduce Dr. Jeannie Barrow. Dr. Jeannie Barrow is going to be our facilitator for the first program. And Dr. Jeannie is a well-known, recognized, there she is, the well-known, recognized author, global or international coach, best-selling author, and she was a best-selling author of a book, Fearless Women at Work. And now she's about to publish her second book, which I've been very honored to be part of. And we welcome her. She has created a system called CARES for coaching executives at a very high corporate level. So Jeannie, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. I see the chat is on fire already. Welcome, yes. Everyone. Thank you so much, Susana, for having me. And I am honored to facilitate the first panel. This is a really important conversation that we're having. I want to thank Latinas in Business for providing these types of resources for all of us. I am the founder and CEO of Executive Bound, and I started my business 4 years ago. And like all of you, I've been hit by this pandemic. And this is a very timely topic, as our esteemed panelists, Wendy Garcia, Christina Fuentes, and Jennifer Garcia, will be sharing with you some of the knowledge, the resources, and the trends that they have noticed in New York, New Jersey, and California to help all of us with our businesses so that we can not only survive, but thrive in the years to come. So with that, I want to introduce each of the panelists, but I also would like for them to introduce themselves. Just a couple of minutes each. Why don't we start with Wendy? And Wendy will tell us who she is. And this is going to give us some background and context as to the information that Wendy is going to share with us. So Wendy, why don't you tell us who you are and what you do?
Happy Friday, everybody. I'm sure everyone is excited to start this weekend. And if in New York, we are still in winter, even though it should be spring. So hopefully we'll see some better weather. I'm Wendy Garcia. I'm the Chief Diversity Officer. I work in the Controller's Office. And my role is really to look at how to increase access for women and people of color across the city of New York. A lot of my job is really looking at how do we increase access, how do we change policies, and more importantly, how do we make sure that the dollars are going where they're supposed to in a city where 80% of people are women or a person of color. So I'll leave it right there. And I just want to say I'm really excited to be here. Susana, you're a rock star. Bilal is my sister from another mister, and Jeannie, you sound amazing. So I'm really honored to be part of this group, and I can't wait for the panel.
Thank you so much, Wendy, and we can't wait for all the goodies you're going to be sharing with us. So everybody's going to be in for a treat. So now I would like to ask Christina Fuentes to introduce herself and tell us who she is and what she does. Hi, Christina.
Thank you. Hi, thanks for having me. So I am the Managing Director of Community Development here at the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, which is essentially classified like we're their state bank, you know, so we offer a lot of products and services associated to providing access to capital. Under Governor Murphy's administration, though, the focus has been really on small businesses and what I would consider micro as like true mom and pop shops on our main streets, right? And that really hasn't been something that the state authority really focused on. So, you know, under Governor Murphy's administration, we've been able to have this focus and really target and like do outreach that's more impactful and really focus on how we can best serve our small business community holistically. So part of that is I've been releasing new products and really just focusing on those relationships. And we have a new Economic Recovery Act here in New Jersey, which offers state incentives as well on top of the federal stimulus package that we have too. But it's also, how do we just make sure everyone has, you know, the availability, knows about the products and how they can actually tap into them as well too. So I'm happy.
So important.
Yeah.
So important. Thank you so much, Christina. And you're definitely going to give us your perspective when we go through the questions. And next, I want to introduce or have Jennifer Garcia introduce herself and tell us who she is and what she does.
Yes, well, good morning, good afternoon to those in the East Coast. My name is Jennifer Garcia. I am the acting CEO for Latino Business Action Network, and it's a nonprofit. We have a big mission, and that's to empower Latino and Latina-owned businesses to scale their companies. Our aggressive goal is to double the number. We want to see the numbers of 10 million, 100 million, 1 billion Latino and Latina-owned businesses. So how do we do that? We collaborate with Stanford University. We really have three pillars of focus. The first one is research on Latina and Latino-owned businesses. The second one is a Latino entrepreneurship scaling program, which is out of the Graduate School of Business. And the third is ecosystem development, really cultivating a network of Latino and Latina-owned businesses to continue to scale their business. So we are nationwide. Obviously, we're based out on the West Coast with our collaboration with Stanford, but we're nationwide. We survey Latinos across the country, and our scaling program is open to businesses across the country as well.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. So you could see just by the introductions that you are indeed for a treat. So why don't we dive right in? And I'm going to ask about 5 questions. The first question will be for all the panelists. The last question will be for all the panelists. And in between, I'm going to ask each of the panelists one specific set of questions. So we're going to have about, for this next segment, I want to devote about 10 minutes. So about 3 minutes each. Can you tell us, from your position of leadership, working with the Latina community and other minority communities, what is the impact that you have seen from COVID-19? And what are the hardest hit industries and businesses? And what do the businesses need the most help with? So if you want to start, Wendy.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a loaded question. I would definitely say, I think on a national level, small businesses have been hit disproportionately more than any other sector. But if you look at specifically, I can speak on behalf of New York. If you look specifically in New York and the industry hit for New York City, restaurants have been disproportionately impacted in our particular city, because we had elongated the quarantine process for many of the restaurants. In New York City, they just opened up restaurants at, I think they just announced at 50% or 75%, and this was most recently. Other parts of, at least the Northeast, I believe, or other parts of the nation, they were already open and fully able to function. There was a point that they were completely shut down, and it was still a year in. So that has been a really tough process for many New York small business owners. I would say in general, the patterns that I've seen when we look at research is that we did a survey in our office that looked at COVID during the beginning, like just that March, April time, and what was the impact there. And 80% of the 500 owners that we interviewed said that the major challenge was not being able to receive those PPP dollars. That was really early on in March. The other challenge was just being shut down, and many said that 6 months later they were going to be out of business. So we were we saw a very high overturn in cash flow that didn't exist. Once the change of PPP dollars came in, we saw that narrative change, and we're doing our second survey now. We have not released it, but I will give you some preliminary results. So don't ask me for the numbers yet, because you'll see them released later on. But we're actually seeing that workforce is the biggest issue. It's the restaurants that have been able to stay afloat, or the businesses that have been able to stay afloat, have had to furlough the employees. So we're looking at a workforce issue. And as you know, Jeannie, this is an area that disproportionately impacts Latino businesses and Latinas in the workforce. So we're seeing the narrative change, but really it's about boosting the economy right now and making sure that we can get people to bring back jobs and stay afloat.
Yeah, New York City is completely different. I mean, I've just from what I hear from my friends, I haven't really been in much, but even watching the images on TV of what Times Square looks like today versus what it looks, what it typically looks like, it is something to be, could have never imagined that.
Yeah.
And so I know that a lot of people are hurting because of all the shutdowns in the city and the restaurants being closed. So thank you so much, Wendy. What about you, Christina? What have you noticed has been the biggest impact in New Jersey?
Yeah, so in New Jersey, we suffer just as much as New York, right? So that tri-state area has really been impacted. So Governor Murphy just bumped it up to 50% capacity for the restaurants, which has been like a godsend for a lot of them. But really, it's anyone who is, in close contact with people, right? So you think about it, it's your gyms, it's your retailers, it's your barbershops, it's your hair salons, nail spas, like anybody that basically has to service or in a close contact. People just didn't know how to, right? So it was like, how do I pivot? How do I change this? And some of the restaurants who had already set up online ordering really had an advantage over others. So we noticed some of the surveys that we've done as well too. It's like, okay, how can we give these small business access to online social media marketing? A lot of them didn't know how to do that. So we're focusing some of the efforts at EDA on e-commerce, right? How to set up platforms for them, how to get in tune with, the different entities that are out there that can put that platform on your website and allow your customer to touch you in a different basis, right? So it's easier. I think everybody shops now on their smartphone. I think there's like a completely different type of retail situation we have to deal with. And COVID just accelerated that. Like we knew we were coming to this conclusion because of Amazon's and the malls were disappearing, but this has been at an accelerated rate. So a lot of the small business owners that I talk to, it's always like, okay, what's your pivot? How are you going to do this? And some of the tools that we've put out there as well too is like a PPE, which is the personal protection equipment. We've provided grants to them so they can have access to buying, especially with the daycares, like the equipment to spray down the toys and additional, like, the doorknobs and everything that the kids are touching to allow their customers to just feel safe to send their kids again. Like, that's really what it is. Like, how can you make your customer feel safe coming to you again? And so that's some of the things that unfortunately business owners have to factor into their business plans now, cost of doing business. And I think it's going to be like this for a long time, that we need to start thinking like this and just making sure the states are putting out the resources. And that's really what we're trying to do.
Thank you, Christina. Yeah, absolutely. I live in New Jersey, so I have been definitely seeing and just watching what's happening here. Thank you so much. And Jennifer, when it comes to California, what has been the biggest impact to businesses there?
Yeah, well, I really want to echo a lot of what Wendy said, and I would say that what Wendy has, narrated for New York is probably very similar to our macro numbers across the country. So I mentioned one of our pillars is research. We have two researchers out of Stanford. It's the Stanford Latino Entrepreneurship Initiative. And so they survey Latino business owners across the country on an annual basis, but then they also did a COVID thematic report, and they pulled them, early on, I think just after PPP was announced, and then we did it again in August. So we were able to measure in between. And so just to emphasize and put some numbers around what you were mentioning, Wendy, is that the PPP funding gap is really just a snapshot of the overall access to capital gap. But to give you some numbers around that, of those, and I'm speaking for Latino businesses specifically, of Latino businesses that applied, only 18% received PPP funding in round one. For those that we broke it down by scaled, and we define scaled businesses by businesses of $1 million of annual revenue or greater. So these, you're looking at your established companies. 28% of those businesses received funding versus 18 for all the others, for the smaller companies. And that's, that's horrific when you look at those numbers. And so I think that is a snapshot of the access to capital that entrepreneurs face in general. But the other really challenging thing, and I probably don't have to tell anybody in the audience or on this panel, right, is the impact on women. And I think there was such a drastic impact, probably because of the very traditional role women play. I heard someone earlier say, you know, I'm going to pause my camera because I have kids and whatnot. I mean, it's been really challenging. And what we saw is that nearly twice as many Latina-led companies experienced closure during COVID. So that was, the numbers there was like 30% versus 16% of their Latino counterparts. Again, that is huge. And so the conversation really that we're thinking about is how do we reconnect with these women entrepreneurs that are innovative, that are business leaders, and really get them back onto their table. And then finally, I would say the third big challenge, and again, I don't think this is specific to California, but across the country, is the disparities in technology and the working from home capabilities, right? Our whole world was forced to stay home and work from home, and some businesses were able to make that pivot. But if we look at the Latino cohort specifically, only 28% of scaled Latino-owned businesses had the ability to work from home. And so I say scaled because that's, again, our $1 million and above. They own only 28% of their employees had the ability to work from home versus 44% of white-owned businesses. 28%, that's a very small fraction of their workforce. And think about all of the not scaled businesses, the businesses that are below $1 million, right? They're going to be hit at a much more negative level. And I think that, when we just talk about their ability to work from home, that means their whole operations of businesses really took a significant hit just with with COVID, right? Yeah. And so it means that we have work to do. It means that there is lots of opportunity to really strengthen small businesses, our Latina and Latino-owned businesses. There is just a tremendous amount of work that we can do.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Thank you, everyone, for giving us that overview of where you stand in New York, New Jersey, California. And I'm so glad that we're having this conversation, because I believe that part of the solution is us empowering ourselves so that we have the information, so that we apply for the resources that are available and don't leave them on the table. So I want to commend everybody who's on this session, because that's exactly what we are here to do, to find out where are the resources, what can I go after, what information do I need, and then having that information, taking action. So let's start with the first question for Wendy. So those of you who have businesses in New York, Wendy, in your position in the city of New York, what are the resources businesses are looking for the most? And then I have a couple of follow-ups for you after that.
Sure. And I think there are levels, right? If you're looking for federal resources, I would suggest getting on a lot of the webinars with MBDA, who does a lot of workshops. And there's a specific program that it's the Furlough Employee Program. It's under the COVID package. Specifically, if you are a business that had to lay off, let's say 50% of your employees or 10%, whatever the percentage is, you should be looking at that program.
Can you repeat that, Wendy? When you said that, you cut out a little bit.
I was saying it's the Furlough Employee Program. It's at the federal level. And I'll get you the exact language for it. We can put it in the chat.
Great.
If you're looking for state resources and you're in New York City and your rent's too high, because that is normally what happens in New York City, there is an eviction moratorium that you should be aware of. It has included commercial businesses and commercial rents, because in New York, most businesses don't own their space, specifically storefronts. So please look at the eviction moratorium, and that should be protecting you for the next few months as you get your cash flow back up. And at the city level, I would recommend that you look at the Department of Small Business Services. They have emergency funds that exist around COVID, or if you've had some sort of disaster happen, you should be looking at that program as well. I would say the majority of cash flow, though, is coming from the federal level. So that is where the grants are coming from. If you're interested in grants and items of that sort, my office has compiled a list of potential grants that are specifically for women and people of color that you should all be looking at. There's been a slew of corporations who have made announcements around this, and I can also send that to Susanna so that she can send it out to everyone on the email.
That would be amazing.
Pilar just put on the chat the furlough program.
MBDA, Minority Business Development Agency furlough program. Thank you so much, Pilar. And then in regards to funding, Wendy, what is the level of success small businesses with about 50 employees or less are having with the federal and the state programs?
Yeah, so I want to give it to you anecdotally because I don't have, I'm not the federal agency, so I don't like to speak of the federal government. But I could tell you that our studies have shown that for New York City businesses who are women and people of color, at very early on, we saw that a good 80 to 70% were not even eligible for PPP. So receiving PPP was not even a discussion. As we moved, the pattern that we saw was that when the administration changed and allowed minority depository banks to have access to the federal dollars and distribute them, they took away one criteria, which was that you didn't need to have a banking relationship. When that criteria was removed, we saw later on, we saw the benefits of that probably in the December range. And now we're seeing businesses getting federal funds. So in this line of survey that we just did, and I'm just giving you preliminary numbers, we are seeing higher numbers between 80 and 90% of businesses actually getting cash flow from the federal government. I think that has a lot to do with the fact that minority banks can help minority communities, and who has been disproportionately impacted here has been our Black, Latino, and Asian communities. So that is the pattern that we're seeing, that there of the people that have applied, more people are receiving. There is another statistical gap, sorry, not to take up all the time, but there is another statistical gap around people who have not received anything or have shut down. And the shutting down, we don't have numbers on that yet. So we know that either you didn't pivot or you got shut down completely because of the criteria, or they didn't there was no relief early on so that you can come up. Many businesses who started in the last 5 years were more likely to lose life during COVID because their longevity was much shorter. So we're seeing, those are the patterns that we see overall.
Thank you, Wendy. And we're going to get more resources at the end to share. So if you can think of any other resources that you want to share with the audience, that would be amazing for us to share it at the end. So thank you, Wendy. And let's go over to Christina in New Jersey. So Christina, at the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, the department has made a big push to provide access to funding and knowledge to small businesses with several rounds of funding. What results have you seen, and what are the obstacles that businesses are encountering the most when accessing the funding?
So I always classify it as like two paths, right? So you have a COVID-19 path of products where we were able to, we did some of our own funding, but we also got majority from CARES Act funding. And now with the new stimulus package, we'll have additional grants on top of that. So under the first round of CARES Act funding, we were able to do 3 rounds of grants that went out. And so each round we learned a little bit more. And we really pushed on a local level by hiring some minority-owned small business entities that were marketing firms as well too. So they were able to really market on the local level and create those relationships. We also make sure that they can speak Spanish as well too. We also translated all the applications in 7 languages and set up a direct email for anyone who needed assistance. So, my biggest thing is I know people feel more comfortable speaking in their own language, and they want to do that, and they should feel like that, right? That's the blessing of this country that we have. And so I want them to be able to have that resource. We have staff also in small business services that's bilingual, that addresses everyone's question. And I think that's very important. So with our federal resources, we made sure we did that, but we did it in a more expansive way as well too. So just to based upon those little efforts, though, it increased our percent of people who were able to actually get this funding. So by phase 3 of that, the minority business owners accessed $42 million of grants. That's 6,566 applications, and that was 32% of the grant funding that was out there. So that was a pretty drastic jump that we were able to see. I mean, because before, to be honest, it just wasn't, I guess with COVID, it just brought it to a whole nother level where we could see the impact, right? Especially in New Jersey for sole props. Like, I knew there was a lot of sole props in New Jersey, but I never knew it was like to this level. And I was just like, wow. And so then, also with our micro business owners, we classify micro business as less than 1.5 million in revenue and less than 10 full-time employees as well. And we've created a micro business loan that this was our product, traditional product before COVID. And we did a relaunch as well during COVID. And it's access to capital. Everything we've dropped on our loans is a 600 minimum credit score because we understand people go through struggles. And especially because of COVID, right? It's hard to pay bills on time, which affects your credit score. So it was a guaranteed 2% interest rate, no payments for 3 years. We amortize it straight. Because of the no payments for 3 years, we do it over a 7-year term to make life easier, because explaining a balloon payment sometimes is complicated to people, right? So, we're putting resources out there that it's almost like lending on character, but like taking it out, like being able to allow people to have lower thresholds to be able to get the access they need, but at attractive patient terms. So you can't be a day one startup, but if you're operating for 6 months, you can have access to this capital. And, we allow projections. If you, let's say, your tax returns are not there, we bake in a little bit more flexibility. But then we also have traditional products that if you're looking to go from leasing to buying, you can have a loan product for that as well too. So we traditionally look at collateral and, all the typical things that banks usually, it's a hard time. Like, the banks don't usually typically service a small business. And not just that, I don't feel like, especially in the minority communities, they don't feel comfortable going to a bank. And that was one of our biggest hurdles at EDA, because we're a governmental entity. It's getting that comfortable factor of saying, we're here to help you. And that's the biggest thing. So we always want to make sure we tell people, feel free. Like, if you have a question, it's free. We don't work off commission. We're not here to sell you anything. We're here to help you. And we will connect you. Like, that's the thing too. We connect everybody to, whether you needed help with PPP, your EIDL, if it was somebody with the New Jersey Bankers Association, there were so many people that we would just connect them to get the answers that they needed. And sometimes I think it's just people are so afraid to do that. And I just want them to feel more comfortable on the local level doing that. So There's just been so much we've been trying to do to really, because it just, we saw it at such a disproportionate level of how they felt, how people felt. They felt so missed out, and it's a shame. No one should ever feel like that.
Thank you so much, Christina. And we are going to share exactly where people can go, right, to get your resources.
Yep.
And to be connected to other services that they may need. Beautiful. Thank you so much. And let's go to Jennifer. Jennifer, in California, your reality is very different from Wendy's and Christina's in New York and New Jersey. So when it comes to the Latino Business Action Network, what do you see are the main obstacles that Latino businesses encounter to expand and grow?
Yes. If I may, just before I answer that question, I really want to commend Christina and the work that you're doing. I think everything that you described and the effort of translating and creating an atmosphere where people feel comfortable to come with their questions, all of that is critical. Again, if I point back to our research, 45% indicated a barrier to accessing funding was just that lack of guidance and the know-how. So everything that you just described in terms of trying to break down that barrier and connecting with the entrepreneur is phenomenal. So, great job with that. I really do want to commend you on that.
Thank you.
Well, obstacles, right? What are obstacles to growth? I guess what I want to start with and the way I want to approach this question is I want to outline the factors that we know positively correlate to growth or correlate to scale. So one of that is corporate supplier diversity programs. Obviously, a precursor to that would be business certifications, right? Whether it be women-owned, minority-owned certifications. A huge component is a formal networking membership. So I would say those are probably the top 3 areas that positively correlate to growth is corporate diversity supplier programs, business certifications, and then formal networking. Now, when I think about some of these challenges, and again, this is probably not specific to California, but nationwide, as I'm pulling this data from our research. One of the big things that we're still seeing is that access to capital is a huge barrier, right? In our latest report that was released January of 2021, and I'm seeing this a little bit in the chats as well, national banks have an approval rate of 60% lower, which is 60% lower for Latino-owned businesses versus all others. Again, it really just speaks to the negative impact. That is a huge barrier to growth. When we think about, you need the capital to be able to take on that next contract. You need the capital to be able to think about your next line of business or pivoting, et cetera. That's a huge component. And then we think about, what do we do for that? Well, actually, sorry, let me just take another step here. The formal networking is really important. And we talk about networking a lot in the sense of like our ecosystem development. We have developed a network of entrepreneurs. And I just want to paint this picture of how important a network is. And not only to just have your name on a roster and you're part of, a chamber or something, but really to show up and be active in this network. So if I take you back to 2020, PPP was just announced. If anybody remembers that time, it was chaotic, it was disorganized, there was conflicting information and guidance. What we experienced in our network is that everyone was coming together and chiming in with their experiences. I applied here, this is what they told me. I applied here, I got approval, in 10 days. We can submit multiple applications. And they were just sharing their own experiences. And what that really contributed to was people were able to learn from one another. And that is the power of the network, right? You're sharing resources with one another, but you're also learning with one another. That was specific to PPP, but that continues throughout before and beyond. So I really want to say that having a very strong network of entrepreneurs is important, and something that if you're not part of, if any of the entrepreneurs that are listening, if you're not part of that, that would be certainly one area to focus on. Now, how does our program, what will our program do? I think we continuously need to educate business owners on how to scale, right? When we have scaled businesses, that is a win-win for our economy, right? They create jobs, they invest back into their community. So we need to continue, and we will continue focusing on our scaling program that trains entrepreneurs. It teaches them on the business tools, the business principles that they need to apply in their business to scale. But one of the areas that we will really emphasize in 2021 is this ecosystem development. We're all talking a lot about, I think the direction at this point is how do we move forward? And for some, that might still be moving, that might still mean let's pivot. But for majority, we really need to think about let's grow. And I want to say that, you know, there is a Bank of America actually just announced that the US forecast for the economy is stellar in 2021. Stellar. And I think what we need to help our entrepreneurs think about is if the economy is going to be stellar growth, your company should be stellar growth as well. And so what do you need to do to really just ascertain that and capitalize on that growth? How do you need to prepare? What opportunities do you need to seize to really grow in 2021? So that will be a lot of our work as we go out throughout the year.
Wow, that was really, really impactful. And I see that people are putting a lot of resources in the chat, which will be one of the questions that we're going to address next. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for that information. I could not emphasize enough, like Jennifer did, the value of networking, networking with other entrepreneurs, networking with complementary services to ours, people who can put our names in a hat, and also the minority. This year, at the beginning of this year, I became certified as a minority-owned business, and it's a process that you kind of just have to take one step at a time. But now that means that I have the opportunity to gain some of those big contracts with Fortune 500 companies who have a corporate, diversity supplier program. So it's definitely another avenue for us to continue to grow and continue to scale. So I want to dive into the very last question, which will be our closing question for the entire panel. And while we are doing this, I'm going to ask everybody in the audience, if you have any specific questions that either Wendy, Christina, or Jennifer can answer for you, let's type it in the chat. And because we have so much valuable information in the chat, I don't know if all of you know how to save a chat. So if you look at the chat feature, there's 3 little dots on the bottom right. If you click those little dots, it says Save Chat. So you can keep this and it will download it to your local drive, and you can then copy and paste into a browser, and you can go to those URLs that people have been dropping. Wendy has been giving us, and all of you have been giving us some resources to go to. So let's get to the last part. And I know time flies when you're having fun, right? It's 12:45, almost 12:45. So our last question, and then we will go into a brief Q&A. We'll answer as many questions as we can in the time that we have. So the last question for all the panelists is, how can our members and audience receive information from your organization, your programs, and available resources? And where should they go to for help if they need assistance with funding in your area? So some of you have already answered that. So if you want to just kind of highlight what you already share on the chat so people know what they're going to get to, that would be amazing.
Yeah. So if you look at the chat, I've dropped a few links, but what I wanted to highlight is that our office hosts what's called MWBE University. The concept of that is that every other month we host a workshop and we discuss topics like how are banks approving cash flow for small businesses. That's going to be actually the next one that comes up. We're going to be showing people, if you want to get on a corporate board, how do you learn how to get on a corporate board? So we're going to be bringing consultants from around the nation to come discuss their criteria and it's really to have a push on women and people of color to get on those boards. Most of the time they are looking for business owners. So please log on to that. And then there are other workshops around how to navigate around getting a contract in the city of New York and getting a contract with our office, whether you are an investment manager or you're selling cupcakes. We're going to be having a series of all those conversations. I would recommend that you email us at diversity@comptroller.nyc.gov, which is also in the chat. You can navigate if you want to learn about your particular industry and which agencies in the city of New York buy your products and or services. We will do a market analysis for you and put together a very long presentation that'll give you an overview on who your competitors are in the city of New York, what other businesses have retained your services, and which agencies buy what you get. And then you'll also get an overview of the dollar amount associated with that. We will also do the introductions to the agency so you don't have to experience the bureaucratic tape around calling an agency, not getting a call back. So please, again, diversity@controller.nyc.gov. And if not, catch us at MWBE University and sign up for a workshop.
Thank you so much, Wendy.
Free,
So much, so much valuable information. So I hope that the audience is going to take advantage of these resources that are available. All right, Christina, what do you have for us in New Jersey?
So I put in the chat the Small Business Services webpage, which has our direct email, which is smallbusinessservices@njeda.com. And we always have someone that's literally his job is to run that inbox. And so he will always, follow up with you, and we can connect you to the right person if you have a general question or just guidance that you may need. But then I also provided our New Jersey COVID website as well, too. So that provides holistically all the products and resources that are going to be out there and that are going to be coming up. So with EDA, any product that we administer with the federal stimulus funds, we always make sure that everyone, we'll do webinars, panels to make sure people understand what that application is going to look like, how to actually, have all those documents in place, ready to go. So this way you're ready to be prepared. You have your tax returns if you need them, formation documents, whatever's going to be necessary. So I always tell people you have to do homework. Like, this is your homework, get it, here's your checklist, make sure you get everything lined up, ready to go, because unfortunately the stuff is first come, first serve. So we want to make sure everyone has the same kind of access to that. So we'll most likely be having, another COVID loan as well too, and then some grants. So that portal is, and there's a chat bot too, which I'm not very good with technology, but there's someone behind that little chat bot that will answer your questions. So they will connect you directly. If you have a problem with Treasury, they connect you right directly to Treasury as well too. Because like what Wendy was referencing, we have the same issue. People, they're like, I'm trying to get a hold of taxation, I can't get a hold of anyone. And so, but that's part of what we do for you as well too, just because I've been in government for a long time and I know how it works. And, part of everything is knowing who the right people are, and we help you with that. So
thank you so much, Christina.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And before we run out of time, I want to go to Jennifer and talk about the resources that people can access.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. So the first one that I would say, I'm going to put it in the chat here, is it is an event that we're having next Thursday. It's actually a six-session series, but our first one is kicking off next Thursday. It is really about a mindset and thinking about how you are going to approach growth in 2021. It's a free event. I put the registration link in the box. Those are my colleagues. And the second thing that I would say is our education scaling program. This is out of Stanford University. It is open to businesses across the country, including Puerto Rico. We are industry agnostic, so we take any industry is welcome to apply. If that is you, if you are just interested in scaling your business, taking your business to the next level, and not only participating in a program, but also being part of a national ecosystem of scaled businesses, I really welcome you to apply. You can find more information and our application on our website, which I just put in the chat as well. We have this program twice a year, once in the spring and once in the fall. Spring is starting May 5th, so I would encourage you to apply as soon as possible. And our fall cohort will be at the end of September. And then thirdly, I would love to get our research disseminated, certainly to Wendy and Christina, but anybody else in the audience. We're looking to get our research into the hands of decision makers, policymakers, people who can really create an atmosphere that is conducive to Latino and Latina growth. And so Wendy and Christina, you already talked about fantastic work that you're doing. I think research, data is powerful. You can lead with data to really implement change. And so I'm going to share our research as well. And I would invite any of the audience to read it so that, one, you could understand the impact that Latinos are making in our economy. And then secondly, that you can disseminate that to your networks or anywhere else that we could begin to move the needle for positive growth.
Thank you so much, everyone. Wendy, Christina, Jennifer. I know that these are really tough times, and I love the word mindset because we need to lead with a growth mindset, knowing that this too shall pass, and that things are going to get better, and that we need to take action in order for that to happen. So I'm so grateful that I was even part of this panel. I learned so much as the facilitator, and I saved the chat so that I can access some of the resources here in New Jersey where I live. And I want to thank all of you, Wendy, Christina, Jennifer, for the work that you're doing for making this information available to people and how much we appreciate it and value it. So I want to pass it over to Susana. We're going to go through the Q&A and answer any additional questions you may have. I haven't seen any specific questions in the chat. Oh, I see Janet asked, seems like this is only focused on existing businesses. And if there are any other questions that people have, please type them in the chat. And I believe that Susana and Danae were monitoring the chat for questions.
Okay, so we are back to, this was fabulous. This was a fabulous, fabulous panel. And I appreciate everybody so much for now. This was really raising the bar, guys. I mean, and two things that happened during the panel. Jennifer's kid coming in, and everybody was still focused, and everybody still, you know, there was a little smile right there, but everybody was so focused. This is women at work. This is what we do. We do everything, and we can do it very well. So that was the perfect situation to show the power of women, and we can really do our tasks with all our energy and all our resources. The second thing I think I took from this panel is that the pandemic, with all the sadness and all the loss that it brought to us and to all of us, because everybody knows probably someone, you know, if they didn't lose someone in their families, they know someone who did. But at the same time, it pushed us so hard. It pushed us to become better, to improve our businesses, to improve our organizations. The resources were there, the tools were there. We just had to push forward to become more relevant, and all of those who did really were very successful. And I think that has created a fantastic momentum for a lot of small businesses.